Hello board game brothers and sisters, I'm Adam Singer and welcome to another episode where I'll be letting you know of all the board games launching on Kickstarter and GameFound over the next week. And if you're new to the channel, we do this every week going over all the upcoming campaigns, so if you want to stay up to date, this is definitely the place to be. But as always, I do like to start these episodes by going over some new announcements and discoveries I just found out about over the past week. And I don't have a whole lot to update you on, but I do have a couple things. And the first is that we do have an official update for the game Townfolk Tussle and the upcoming expansion campaign that's going to be coming on March 14th. And this is going to be called the Foul Neighbors and Odd Jobs expansion, with the Foul Neighbors essentially adding more enemies and characters that you can play as, just adding more content to the game, while the Odd Jobs are actually going to be adding a little bit different mechanisms and different ways to actually play the game. So if you are a fan of this game, or if you missed out on the previous campaign and you're looking for another opportunity to jump in on it, they do have the pre-launch page up, so you can go ahead and get notified on launch. Or as always, you can click that subscribe button down below, because I'll definitely be covering this one on the week of its launch. And the next announcement is one that I didn't really have a chance to look into whatsoever, but I did notice that there was a campaign launch that is based on a video game's IP. And I do like pointing out games that are based on existing content, because you might already be a fan of the IP, and if you are, you'll probably want to check out the campaign because it's already something that you might be interested in. I haven't played the video game and I haven't looked into the way that this game plays just yet, but I will be covering it in the week of its launch, so as always, you can subscribe down below. And that's it for new announcements, but one thing I do always like to mention is that I do work with Alex over at Board Game Co. in order to put together these lists of upcoming campaigns. He puts out a video at the start of each month letting you know of all the games that we know about so far for that month, and then I do these every single week, going into more detail into the games and keeping you updated with any changes or new announcements that might happen throughout the month. So if you want a bit of a sneak peek of the games to come each month, definitely go ahead and subscribe to his channel. He also offers a ton of other content covering different reviews and playthroughs, as well as covering all sorts of different topics related to board gaming and the board game community. And you can find a link to his channel in the description below. But with all that said, let's check out the campaigns. And the first campaign we have launches on February 13th, and this one's called Bound. And this is a 2-player strategy game that takes about 5 to 20 minutes to play. And this is a campaign that I thought was launching a couple weeks back, so I did already cover this one, so I'll just go ahead and roll that footage for you now. And this one is a small abstract strategy game that uses a pentacle-shaped board. And if you know what that shape is, I am impressed, but it is basically a circle with a star in it. And in this game, each player has 4 pawns out on the board, and each turn you're going to be able to move one of your pawns. And the goal of this game is to try and completely encircle one of your opponent's pawns first. And if you're able to do that, you'll win the game. And something to note about this campaign is that it will be a print in place, so there's a really low cost to entry. And to play the game, all you'll have to do is print off a sheet of paper, which will have everything you need in order to play the game, as well as some really cute and fun animal artwork. And the next campaign we have launches on February 14th, and this one's called the Horror Game Show. And this plays 2 to 4 players and takes about 120 to 160 minutes to play. And this is a competitive game where players are taking on the role of a producer on a new reality TV show. Players are going to be controlling their own team of competitors as they compete to make the most money and fame by doing different things like fulfilling personal contracts between you and different advertising agencies, completing shared challenges, or even by earning special achievements. And an example of this would be like eliminating the most other characters. And the game begins by each player creating their own team of competitors and building a deck of action cards. And these cards are going to allow you to do different things like move your characters around on the board, gain fans which you can then use to perform special abilities later in the game, draw more cards into your hand, or even perform some other special actions. The game plays over 12 rounds, and each round you're going to be revealing 2 cards. One is an event card that's going to have a special effect that affects all players. Then there's going to be the shared challenge card that will give an objective for all the players to try to achieve in order to gain some additional victory points. Players then draw their hand of cards, and then they'll bid for player order by choosing to discard any number of cards from their hand. The player who discards the most cards will be able to go first, and then they'll also be able to hire a hunter, which is one of the special characters that you'll gain from the shared market. You'll be adding that character to your team, and the thing that's different about the hunters is that they're much more aggressive and powerful, and they are essentially the unhinged MVPs of your team, lacking any moral or ethical boundaries. Players will then take turns playing their action cards, putting characters out on the board, moving them, and engaging in battle with any of the other characters that they happen to run into. And when combat occurs, each of the characters are going to be rolling a number of dice, and they're going to be arranging them from highest to lowest, and then comparing them one by one. And then the player with the lowest die in each pair is going to be losing health, while the other player gains an additional fan. And as I said, having a large fan base is really helpful because it'll allow you to perform different bonus actions like re-rolling some of your dice or manipulating some of the rules to your favor. And any player that is able to reduce another character's health completely down to 0 will also gain additional benefits for that, and the game continues like this until the 12 rounds are completed, and the player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game. And launching on February 15th, we have Crystal Age, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 30 to 120 minutes to play, and this is a fantasy-themed strategy board game that can be played competitively, cooperatively, or even solo. And in this game, each player is going to be controlling one of 4 heroes with the goal of defeating the powerful monsters located at the center of the board. These monsters are known as the Lords of Corruption, and they are really powerful, so you're probably not going to want to go just headfirst into these battles. Instead, you're going to want to level up your characters first, and there are a couple ways to do that. The first is to be visiting the different areas of the board, and the board's broken up into different biomes, with each of the different biomes having different types of creatures that reside there. And of course, you can engage in battle with all these different creatures, but the really cool thing about it is that whenever you defeat a creature, you're actually going to be gaining their abilities by keeping their card and adding it to your hero. But another way that you can level up your character is by completing one of the challenges provided by the Guardians, and these Guardians are different statues that are blocking different areas of the board, and any player can go and try to attempt that challenge, and if you're able to complete that challenge, then you will also be gaining that Guardian's unique power. And in this game, a player's turn is split into 2 phases. There's the movement phase and then the action phase. And during the movement phase, there's 3 types of movements that you can choose from, either the simple movement that moves you 1 space, the jog that moves you 2 spaces, or the sprint that moves you 3 spaces. The other difference between these is that the more spaces you move, the more of a penalty that you'll get. And it's in the action phase where players will be able to use their abilities and attack the different creatures and monsters. And to do this, players will be rolling dice and then comparing those results to the monster's health and armor points. But then players will also be able to use their different abilities that they've gained throughout the game to manipulate those dice, heal themselves, or do other actions to turn the battle in their favor. And in order to win the game, if you're playing solo or cooperative, you need to defeat as many of those Lords of Corruption as there are players. But if you're in the competitive mode, it is the last player standing who wins the game, and players can fight each other as well. As always, if you want to know more, I have links in the description below. Also launching on February 15th, we have Eye of Zamrock Invasion. This plays 1 to 6 players and takes about 60 to 360 minutes to play. And this is a fantasy-themed strategy game where players are going to be playing as one of the leaders of 6 different kingdoms. Players will be competing to complete all sorts of different objectives in order to gain medals, which can then be exchanged for all sorts of different things. And the first player that builds the 3rd level of the Crystal Tower is going to be the player that wins the game. The game is played over several rounds, with each round consisting of 3 different phases. There's the action phase, the economy phase, and the kingdom phase. During the action phase, players are going to be taking turns moving their heroes and army units around on the map, fighting different demons and building different buildings. And when you do build buildings, you're going to be spending resources and coins in order to do that, but they're also going to be granting you with some different abilities and benefits. And it's in the economy phase where you really see this, because you're going to be gaining resources from the different sites that you have, and you can also purchase resources from the bank or other players to buy crystals or other items that you might need. And the costs of the crystals do increase as the game goes on, so you really do have to balance buying those sooner, opposed to using those resources that you have in order to upgrade your army. But then there is the final phase of the round, which is the kingdom phase, where players can take one of 3 kingdom phase actions, which is either to quest, build, or collect taxes. Questing allows you to complete different challenges in order to earn money and additional medals, while the building action allows players to choose between building more buildings, building up their crystal towers, recruiting armies, or even reviving knocked out heroes. But if you do choose to collect taxes instead, that's going to be earning you coins, and the amount that you earn is going to depend on the number of territories that you own. And the rounds continue like this, and the first player to complete all 3 levels of their Crystal Tower wins the game. Also launching on the 15th, we have Dim Sum Duel of the Dumplings, and this is a 2-player dueling game that takes about 5 to 15 minutes to play. And in this game, players are competing to try and collect the most dumplings by the end of the game. And this is a game that has 2 identical decks, one colored blue and one colored orange, and each player is going to be gaining one of these decks. But then each player is also going to be able to go through their own respective deck and arrange the cards in whatever order they want, because they're going to be using that deck as a draw deck. So you're going to be trying to put those cards roughly in the order that you intend to play them. But you're not completely locked in with the order that you arrange the cards, because you still have a little bit of leeway, because the way that this works is that this deck becomes your draw deck, and then you're going to be revealing 3 of those cards face up, and then on your turn you'll be able to choose to either play a card from one of those 3 cards or to instead draw a card from your draw deck. And there's 5 different types of cards in the game, with the first one being the pot card, and you can have as many of these cards out on the table as you are able to, but you will have to play one of these before you're able to play any dim sum cards, because the dim sum cards must be played into a pot. And one thing to note about this is that you can play as many dim sum cards into a single pot as you like, but until you play a lid card on top of that stack of cards, all your dim sum cards are going to be at risk, because the other player can play a chopsticks card, and that's going to completely eliminate that stack of cards unless you're able to put a lid on that pot first. But once you do put a lid on it, you're no longer able to add dim sum to that pot. And this is why it's so important to see which cards are available to your opponent, because you do also have the burn card available to you, and you can use this card to burn any of the cards in your opponent's display. So if you see your dim sum at risk, you could do this to try and get rid of your opponent's chopstick card if they have one available, but then they might also do that back to you to try and get rid of your lid card to try and prevent you from being able to secure your dim sum. So timing is really, really important. But if you do burn an opponent's card, that card does get replenished immediately, so that there's always 3 cards out on display for each player. And the game continues like this until both players have run out of their cards to play, and the player with the most dim sum or dumpling cards still in play at the end of the game wins the game. And launching on the 16th, we have something that's a little bit more board game adjacent, and it's more geared toward any of the GMs that are out there. So if you are a game master and you're creating a lot of different characters for different D&D campaigns, this one might be of interest to you, because this one is for a set of dice that will allow you to rapidly generate stats for different D&D characters. And if you've done this before, you're probably familiar with the 4d6 drop the lowest method, where you're going to be rolling 4d6s, then dropping the lowest, doing some math, doing that several times in order to generate your character or a group of characters. But with these dice, you can generate all those stats with a single roll with essentially the same odds as that standard method. And the way these dice work is that they are not standard d20s. Instead, the numbers have been modified so that if you do the math, it ends up with the results that I just explained. Definitely a bit of a niche offering here, but if you are a game master and you want to have a little bit of a quality of life improvement when generating those stats, you can find more about this campaign in the description below. And launching on February 17th, we have Ancient Terrible Things Reawakened, and this plays 1 to 4 players and takes about 40 to 120 minutes to play. And in this game, players are explorers traveling down a river in a riverboat through a dangerous forest filled with all sorts of different creatures. And a really nice addition to this version of the game that really adds to the ambiance is that there's actually a riverboat dice tower that you're going to be using to roll your dice. And the way this game works is that there's all sorts of different locations located all around the riverboat, and each of these are going to be associated with a different action, but they also are going to have a random enemy assigned to that location that if you happen to put your worker there, you're also going to have to fight that enemy. And in order to do all this, players are going to be taking turns placing their worker at one of these locations, and whenever you do that, you're going to be gaining any resources that have built up there over time. But then, as I said, each location is going to have a special action that the player gets to do, but then there is also going to be a communal action that all players get to do. I really like this idea because not only are you trying to go to a location with the action that you want to perform, but you're also trying to time that at the moment where that communal action benefits you the most and doesn't benefit your opponents. These actions can do all sorts of different things, like gain you resources or coins, or allow you to buy or sell items from the market. And those cards that you gain are really important because you're going to be building up your engine of abilities as the game goes on, which is going to give you more confidence when trying to fight those more challenging encounters. And that is exactly what happens after you've performed your actions, because now you're going to have to deal with the encounter at that location, and each encounter is going to have a number of points associated with it, as well as a certain pattern of die that you're going to have to roll equal or better to in order to successfully defeat that enemy. Since the requirement of this one is 5 different 4s, that means that you're going to have to roll 5 dice that are equal or greater than a 4. Not an easy task, but if you have the right abilities and items, this might be something that you are capable of. And the encounters and the way that the dice rolling along with the abilities work in this game is another thing that I think looks like a lot of fun, so I guess it's probably at this point that I should mention that this one is my own personal pick of the week. And when you do get involved into an encounter, you'll be able to use your abilities in order to manipulate the dice that you're able to roll. You're usually going to be rolling 7 dice, 5 of which are going to be colored, indicating that they are used to try and fulfill the requirements of that encounter. But then there is always 2 action dice, and I will come back to those in a second here. But depending on the abilities and resources that you have available to you, you might be able to swap out some of those basic green dice with dice of different colors, because not only do the abilities that you have affect the way that your encounter can unfold, but there's also different dice that you can gain, and some of these are more beneficial than others depending on what you're trying to achieve. And once that's all said and done and you've rolled those dice, you'll have one final chance to modify the outcome. But the thing that's really cool here is that you don't just have free access to all your actions willy-nilly. Instead, you're going to have to spend those action dice that you rolled in order to activate the actions on your cards. But as you might have noticed, some of those action dice do have icons on them, which can grant you special benefits if you don't use them on your turn. So this does create a really great decision point where you have to choose whether to keep that die or spend it to perform one of your actions. Defeating that encounter will gain you that card along with the victory points, but each of those cards also comes with an icon beside the name of the card, and there is also a set collection aspect here where if you can create different combinations of icons, you'll gain additional victory points at the end of the game. But if you are unable to defeat that encounter, you're going to be gaining insanity tokens, and these count as negative victory points at the end of the game. But there is one nice thing about acquiring them, and that's that they can be spent in order to perform some special bonus abilities. And when you do that, you're going to be flipping it, indicating that you've spent that token, but you still do keep that token, and it still does count as negative points at the end of the game. And the game continues like this, with players taking turns choosing a location, performing the actions there, and then fighting the encounter. Then the player with the most victory points at the end of the game wins the game. And as always, you can find a link to the campaign down below, and you can click on that Notify Me button in order to get notified when that campaign launches. And those are all the campaigns I have for you this week, but don't leave yet because we still have a few awesome giveaways to announce, and all you have to do to enter these giveaways is leave a comment down below. You don't have to like, you don't have to subscribe, but if you think I deserve it, I do appreciate the love on this Valentine's Day. But as always, I will show my love by announcing these giveaways, and the first one is for Microbot's Duel and Power Up. And if you're not familiar with this game, this is a near indestructible pocket-sized game of BattleBots. And the reason I say that it's near indestructible is because all the components are made to last, and even the cards are waterproof and bendable PVC. And this is a 2-player dueling game where each player is trying to be the first to reduce their opponent's health down to 0, and in order to do that, players are going to be using their action cards from their hand, simultaneously revealing them in order to perform those actions, but then each of the cards is also going to have an initiative value, which is going to dictate which player's action happens first. But a really neat aspect of these cards is that there's 2 different types of cards that you can play. There are your support cards as well as your weapon cards, and some of the values on these cards will multiply depending on how many of those cards you've already played. So whenever you play one of these cards, you're going to be putting them on either side of your player board, indicating which type of card they are. And when battles occur, players also have a limited number of battle tokens ranging from 0 to 5, and you're going to be trying to spend these and guess what your opponent's trying to do in order to try and win those battles and add more attack power to your side. The catch here is that whenever you use one of those, you can't use it again until you perform the refresh action. Using that action does leave you vulnerable, but it does refresh those tokens and give you a little bit of energy that you can spend for other cards and things like that. So it's just an action that you want to be strategic with. And of course, there's a bit more to this, so if you want to know more, you can check out the campaign and the associated videos, but the player who is able to defeat their opponent first wins the game. And this giveaway is going to be for the All-In Pledge, which includes the BattleBots Duel as well as the Power Up expansion. And this giveaway is offered worldwide, so I welcome all of you to leave a comment down below. Say whatever you want, but just be sure to put the hashtag bots in your comment. And if you're looking for some suggestion of what to say, maybe you can let us know what type of weapon you would attach to your BattleBot to help you win in those BattleBot tournaments. I mean, has the plasma cutter ever been done yet? And the next giveaway is a trick-taking game that I think looks like a lot of fun, and this one's called Fork. And what makes this one a little bit more unique than a lot of other trick-taking games out on the market is that rather than using your typical numbers in order to determine who wins a trick, this one actually uses the food chain. But the cool thing about this is that it's not just a one-to-one swap with the numbers. The food chain actually works a little bit different. For example, the fox would be at the top of the food chain while the kale would be at the bottom. But the interesting thing here is that if a fox is played and a kale is played, that fox doesn't actually gain any points, even though in a traditional trick-taking game it would be considered a higher value. And the reason for that, of course, is because the fox cannot eat the kale. so the type of cards that you want to play will depend on what other cards are also in play. And another cool thing about this is that all the cards are put into play face down, except for the Kale, so you do have some advantage for being the last player to add their card into the trick. Because if you see a whole bunch of Kale out on the table, you're probably not going to want to play your Fox. But the other unique thing that this food chain mechanic brings into the game is that when you do have an animal that your animal can eat, not only do you get to take that card and then claim it for its points, but since your card ate that other player's card, that other player's card is no longer going to be able to eat any cards that are out on the table because they got eaten. So that brings in this really neat cascading effect that is unique to this game. And this giveaway is going to be for the deluxe edition of the game that not only gets you the core game, but all the expansion sets as well, which will introduce all sorts of different animals that all behave in their own unique way. Each of them can be added or removed from the game in any mix to create all sorts of different combinations. And to enter this giveaway, just leave a comment down below with the hashtag fork, and if you want some sort of suggestion of what to say, maybe just let us know from the animals available in this campaign, which one would you consider to be your spirit animal? I mean, for myself, a bear is pretty accurate. Eating salmon all the time and then sleeping through most of winter sounds about right. Good luck in these giveaways, but now let's go ahead and draw the winners from last week. And the first giveaway we had was for a copy of Witchbound, and to draw a winner, I use this application here. All these extra names down here are bonus entries for my Patreon subscribers. If you like this sort of content and you want to help make all these efforts just a little bit more sustainable, I do have a Patreon linked in the description below. It gets you all sorts of different benefits, and one of those perks is automatic entries into these giveaways, and we do run multiple giveaways almost every single week. So even if you happen to miss an episode, you can still have peace of mind that you will be entered in those giveaways. But let's go ahead and draw those comments and draw a winner. And the winner is Camille Love, and this is one of our Patreon subscribers, so congratulations, Camille. I'll reach out to you and let you know that you won yourself a pledge for Witchbound. And the next giveaway was for a pledge for Deep Shelves. Let's do the exact same thing here. Let's go and grab those comments and draw a winner. And the winner is Cocklead, and this is one of our viewers here, and I'd ask the viewers to let us know what their favorite seafood is, and they went with prawns, which is an excellent choice. I mean, they're basically a better version of shrimp, and shrimp are already amazing. But congratulations, and just email me at adam@shelfclutter.com and we'll get that pledge all sorted out for you. And that's everything I have for you this week. Not a super huge week in terms of campaigns launching, but I hope there is something that you found interesting. And I hope all of you have a fantastic Valentine's Day with that special someone. I'll be spending mine with a very special solo game, or maybe I'll play a 2-player game between me and a bottle of wine. Honestly, both those options do sound pretty good. But as always, thanks so much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you, and until next time, keep that shelf cluttered and the table full.